Live.
This crowd rises to its feet. Carl slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect. Garland went to the lane, lobbed to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo, the official streaming partner of the Cavs. Watch over 350 channels of live sports and TV, including FanDuel Sports Network without cable. There's no cost and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com/Cavs. Well, the Cleveland Cavaliers came up short against the Boston Celtics. They had a comeback. It looked like they had a chance to maybe come away with this one, but they came up short. And I cannot help but notice a trend. Joining me today is my co-host, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
Cavs win a game when I podcast challenge level impossible. Oh, man. Brutal. Like, come on. You know how I know it's bad is my last 3 thumbnails have been after losses when I'm getting the live stream ready. I got to say, maybe I should have stayed in Spain. You know?
I've only been to Spain once, and staying there longer seems like a good decision, so I can't really, fight you there. But, there was a lot of talk. Oh, the Cavs have trouble against Miami. They have trouble against Atlanta. Maybe they just have trouble against those teams when you're podcasting, because you leave, we win those games, you come back, we lose to Boston after we beat them last time. Come on, man.
Who's to say, but, you're going to have to forgive me if I get a little loopy. My body still thinks it's like 4:30 in the morning right now. As you caught me a mid-enormous yawn while you yelled at me. I yawn a lot during this podcast anyway, if you ever watch the YouTube, but I feel I'm going to be especially yawny tonight. So apologies in advance. It's not that I'm bored by you, though it's possible I am.
Yeah, I am long-winded. When you're sitting there listening to someone talk for this long, you're going to yawn. Maybe I should update the podcast description too. I yawn a lot during this thing. Carter Rodriguez. But yes, the Cavs lost to Boston. Another kind of one of those frustrating games. It seems like when we play Boston, The shooting has been difficult. I think some of that you have to tip your cap to what Boston is able to do, particularly on the interior. The presence of Kristaps Porzingis does make things very difficult for the Cavs on the inside. I think you see that with Darius. I think you see that sometimes with Donovan, although he was spectacular tonight. And I think you've seen that with Evan Mobley as well. They have some troubles on the interior, but the frustrating thing, and this is a double-edged sword because I think it's both frustrating and encouraging. We have had these poor shooting nights against Boston, but we've always been right there. We had a chance to win the game in Boston. We had a chance to win this one. You look at some of the performances in those games. That first game in Boston, it's like, all right, like if you just got a bad game from Darius instead of a terrible one, you probably win it. You could probably say the same thing about Mobley here without like going into the million other factors here. Like if Mobley had, just an okay game, you probably win this one. But
with that said, can I push just a little bit? I will say that I thought they played pretty good basketball games, their first 2 games against the Celtics. I don't think they played well tonight. I think this was a appreciably worse effort from a focus, from a process perspective. More of these turnovers where you just go, what are you doing? More of these, 2 guys close out on rotation. I thought, or navigate something poorly. I feel like Boston got what they wanted more often. Boston scored 112. I think they'll probably leave feeling like they left some stuff on the table on offense. And I just don't think this was their best game. I don't think they played a great game tonight. Do you think I'm being a jerk?
Agree. No, I 100% agree with that. I feel like that isn't a counter to my point. I feel like it strengthens my point. Like they had a chance to still win the game despite that being the case. And, when I cite Darius in Boston or Mobley tonight, I'm not even saying that's the primary contributor to the loss. I'm just saying you look at just a single element that you could change and that could change the outcome here. I thought from a defensive standpoint, overall, they did a very good job against Boston. Obviously, they are going to bait you into some breakdowns. I think, to your point, there was some unforced ones as well where, just miscommunication, scrambling, leaving guys open in the corner. But even despite all of that, they did have a chance to win this one. And I think, to start off why, discussing why that was the case, we need to give a lot of credit to Donovan Mitchell, reigning Eastern Conference Player of the Week, very well deserved. He was fantastic in this game.
Bro, he turns the, I've complained at points this season about his inability. He's had some rough games against great defenses. I feel like he turns the corner and has burst against the Celtics defense. I don't know. I'm so impressed with how he attacks this team, going all the way back to the playoffs, how he can turn the corner, and it feels like he gets to his spot against them faster than they can get there, 9 times out of 10. And in a game where no one was getting to their spot before Boston was getting there, that they only mustered 105 points. It just felt like he could do whatever. He was playing his game as though he was playing against any other team.
Yeah. And this is exactly what you want from Donovan Mitchell against these top teams. I think this is one of those spots where, we talked earlier in the season about how, from an impact standpoint, you could argue, Darius or Evan are kind of impacting the game more, but a large part of that is due to, Mitchell's leadership, taking that step back. This is one of those spots where I think when push comes to shove against contending teams, you feel, the greatness of a Donovan Mitchell. This is where, he steps up and is kind of that, that best player. And I think it is just, a prime example of that. And one of those spots where this is exactly what you want from him. You want him to be the one that, hey, we're in a rut here. We can't get anything going. Go dunk on Kristaps Porzingis. Like we need an electric kind of burst of a couple buckets here. Go get that for us. Get us back on track. Get this game back on the rails. And I think back to even the Knicks series where that was one of my kind of criticisms for Mitchell. Was like I was kind of expecting him with a young team to just take over and to really assert himself. I think this just goes to show the continued kind of maturity of Donovan Mitchell, the understanding that the team kind of dynamics being more solidified. I was just really, really impressed with him. And, we can nitpick stuff. He didn't have he had a great start to the game and then kind of a lackluster middle. There was one point where both he and Darius were 6 of 15 from the floor. But I thought he did a really good job continuing to stay engaged, continuing to be in the team's ear, firing them up, making sure, the dynamics, screaming at the crowd to get them involved after he goes on one of his bursts. I just thought this was a prime example of Mitchell's leadership with the team.
It's also a prime example of like just knowing that he has got that extra gear athletically. Mm-hmm. It has been a year where he hasn't gone to that unless he really feels like he has to. And, as a guy ages, as a fan, I think there is some concern of like, is it that he is pacing himself or is that, it's a little harder for him to do it, and I think those are the natural things that as fans, you just don't always get to know. And I think a game like this where the team needs him to be explosive, both in his change of speed and how he's turning the corner, but also he was an above the rim finisher tonight. Not just in that finish over Porzingis, but you think about that N1 late where he hangs in that extra second in the air so he can kind of hit that scooping layup for the N1. Like I felt like it was just a nice reminder of like when this team needs Donnie to be a 99th percentile athlete, he can do that. I don't think that he there are games this season where he gets his 30 primarily leveraging the threat of the jump shot. I think it kind of went inside out in this game where he was used. It almost was like a throwback scoring game for him where the athleticism is what kind of started the advantage. And then, every now and again he would bomb one, but that wasn't like the main road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was really, really impressed with him. And I thought, he cracked the door open and it was just on whether or not the rest of the team was able to deliver at a level that can, reduce that Boston lead and get them the lead back. They got within kind of, within reach of it, but never were ultimately able to tie the game and get kind of those momentum shots to fall. And, you're not going to beat Boston when you shoot 28% from three. I think, that's, if we wanted to have a 15-second podcast about this one, that would probably be the keynote message.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask you.
I miss listening to you talk. Come on.
Well,
speak.
I was just going to ask you because I'm sitting here really grumpy about some defensive stuff, and I want to talk about it. But was this as simple as they just didn't? Is this a game where you kind of like, as much like where your eye test lies to you? Because the reality is you held Boston, or you held Boston to 112. That's a pretty positive outcome writ large, and you only score 105. Was this a we just couldn't shoot game, and we're dressing up other gripes as that? I don't think I am, because I definitely had some frustrations about how they played, but like it certainly makes it makes me wonder. Because I feel like if you had told me going into the game they were going to hold Boston to 112, I'd be like, well, good process, probably.
Yeah, and I think this is almost reflective of some playoff games that we've had where we just couldn't get enough offense, so therefore we really kind of hyper focus on those defensive lapses. To your point, I don't think that's the case. I don't want to write this off as a shooting variance game, because I think that there are a lot of things that we can still highlight from this game that showcase, it is still going to be an uphill climb when we talk about playing the Boston Celtics, right? Like our margin for our margin of error against the Celtics is a lot more slim than theirs is. Like that, they are going to be favored in a series.
Yeah.
They were favored coming into this game, despite it being in Cleveland, for a reason. And I think what the Cavs need to do is all stuff that they've done against Boston, that they're capable of doing. It just goes to show, that level of crispness, that level of maturity that you need to, from an execution standpoint, to beat a team like Boston consistently. And, ultimately our goal is to do it 4 out of 7 times. So I don't think you're wrong to gripe about the defensive stuff, because on the one hand, we can say, yeah, they did generate, like from a process standpoint, they generated a lot of open shots, particularly from 3. Boston gives up a lot of open shots from 3. That is something that we saw in last year's playoffs. That's something that has changed even more so since Kristaps Porzingis has come back. Their rim defense is better, but they give up the open threes. So we can focus on that. But I also think it's important to highlight kind of, those defensive gripes that you have, all the kind of little things, because there might be a game in a playoff series against Boston where we don't shoot well from 3. I would say, the history of some of these games that we've had during the season would indicate sometimes we're going to have bad shooting games against Boston. But the fact that we can steal them is why you want to iron out, the rest of the game, and not just, basically have the Houston Rockets refrain of, when they'd lose the series and they're like, well, the shooting variance didn't go our way and there's nothing you can do about it. No, you can control the other aspects of the game.
Yeah, you're right. And thank you. Because I definitely, that's how I feel. I feel like meat was left on the bone tonight. And I think that the Boston Celtics right now present real problems for this team. Especially with no Wade or no Okoro. But the reality is, you might need to be able to beat them without those guys, or without those guys in good form. And those guys in good form might not get to play a lot. So, I do think it's not a hand wave. And I think I want to really start my gripes by talking about, and it's not even a gripe because I just don't even know what the answer is. When Porzingis is on the floor, the Cavs cannot guard the Celtics when they only have one big out there. I feel like it was a problem even when Wade did Wade play in that second game? I can't remember.
I think maybe he did.
I can't remember. Either way, I feel like it's been a problem. Porzingis causes problems for this team on both ends of the floor. And I think they consistently got themselves in a spot where their heavy switching defense really gunks them up when they're trying to deal with Porzingis, because a lot of the time, because really only one guy can guard him consistently in the post, and it's either Evan or Jarrett. So what happens is Porzingis will go set a screen on the wing for one of the guards. The Celtics guards are really good at playing crisp, aggressive, really running those actions. So, and the Cavs don't want to give those guys space, so they end up having to switch it. So Jarrett or Evan ends up going out and being stuck on the wing against Derek White, and then Porzingis just walks his ass right to the nail and catches it with a guard on his hip or with Niang on his hip, and the help can't come. Or if it comes, you just get a wide open 3. Yeah. And I do think part of this is that the Cavs, again, goes to my opinion that the Cavs didn't play a good game. There were times where they had opportunities to tag out, especially when Horford was on the floor. A guy you can close out on really hard because he's not going to put the ball on the floor and kill you off the bounce. But, I just felt like the Celtics consistently were generating good looks when you didn't have both bigs on the floor. And you couldn't really play a lot of minutes with both bigs on the floor because Evan Mobley had his worst game of the year. So, yeah. I don't know. Any ideas? Ideas?
Pardon me?
Any ideas? Just do it better?
That's part of it. I agree with your assessment. To answer your earlier point, no, Dean Wade hasn't played against Boston. So I do think that kind of exacerbates it a little bit here, where we've talked about before, having, one of the luxuries of having Dean Wade potentially come off the bench, which we haven't really seen that, right? Of Max Strus starting and Wade coming in off the bench. But one of the luxuries is it gives you two bigs that can guard in space, that can protect the rim, that he rebounds so well at that position. And you're kind of forced from a rotation standpoint into some tough decisions against Boston, right? Like, it really comes down to, do you play George Niang, who's your normal backup power forward in that situation?
And this is not his game matchup. It's just not.
Or do you go to, 6'6" Jalen Tyson, who, has had a nice stretch recently, but we have seen him have issues with turnovers. Boston is a team that is insanely active from a turnover standpoint. As great as Donovan was tonight, that was probably one of the spots where he could have been a little bit better with 5 turnovers. Even Darius had 3. Like, they make talented playmakers make bad decisions. And this would have been a very tough spot to go with Tyson. So I do think some of it, is that, I just feel like from a personnel standpoint, you just don't have that second option, right? And we've talked about the impact of Wade, and this isn't to minimize the impact of Wade, but sometimes I feel like what we feel with him out is just a depth thing, more
A lack
so
of archetype.
It's a depth issue at that archetype, more so than, we can't win without Wade, because we beat Boston without Wade. We beat, we won the Porzingis minutes in that game, without Wade playing. So it's not like the team falls apart without him, but I think in some of these matchups, when you're missing your best 2 perimeter defenders, it does make things a little tough.
Yeah. I think you're right. I do think this matchup is really tough for George. He plays 25 minutes, only gets up 3 field goal attempts, only gets 2 rebounds, no assists, no steals, no blocks. Just like, Boston is just a team that I think is uniquely built to kind of erase him. He's not bigger or stronger than any of their small ball 4s.
Yeah.
Tatum is as big as Niang, as strong as Niang, and faster, and can jump higher. Horford moves as well as him. So there's just not a lot of good spots for him to make that impact. Now, he had a good game in the win. He had, I think, 11 points. He went 3 of 3 from 3, but it's really hard to find him a ton of volume as a shooter. And and it's just a scab to pick on the other end of the floor, because there's just too many guys out there that are really hard for him to guard. So but again, with no Wade, no Okoro, it's really hard to even play Max at the 4.
Yeah,
because that would be kind of your next option.
Honestly, I should have mentioned that, and that's a very smart point by you. Look at you, even tired. You're bringing up great points.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing, because that was where I went. Because if I'm sitting here armchair coaching from home, I'm like, well, this ain't working. We might as well get more mobile and put Max to the 4. Well, that just means more Karras, who had a nightmare game himself. Yeah. So it's it's just kind of a bang-on effect that makes it really hard, And on the Jalen Tyson front, I know some people want to see him. Almost none of his minutes have come at the 4. He's only played a few of those. He has been a pure wing for Kenny so far this season. And, I just don't know if the Boston Celtics are the team that you want to be do a thing you haven't done yet this year on defense within the scheme. Cover new responsibilities. I just don't know if that's where I want to be putting my resources. I guess you could have tried it, because Jerome and Merrill had a good game, so maybe you just say, Max, you play the 4, Tyson, you play the 3, and maybe you have some more success if on a night where it's just hard to play Evan 35 minutes.
Yeah,
because he's getting buried by Drew Holiday on a post up.
And beyond that, we don't know. I don't believe it's even been asked whether or not he's on a minute restriction, but listening to Chris Fedor's podcast prior to the game, even this morning, he was saying that Evan's still not at 100%. He's working his way back with that calf. So I think that Drew possession honestly was one of those where I think you feel it, right? When your base isn't as strong, it's going to be a bit of an issue. But I also don't want to act like, that's the entire story here. I think he has had issues historically going against Porzingis, going against Al Horford.
I just think Porzingis is a problem for this team, man, because he's so
huge.
big.
Yeah.
He closes the advantages that they gain for themselves really, really well. I almost think when I watch Porzingis, I kind of go to this space where I'm like, this is why shot blocking is so valuable, because it's not just the blocks, it's the adjusted release, because you don't want to get embarrassed at the rim by getting your shot swatted. Like, I think it's almost better if the Cavs just play their game. I'd almost rather Porzingis have 6-7 blocks in a game and have the Cavs go up like they normally do.
Yeah.
Than what they were doing at the rim tonight.
He usually tries to go for the emphatic swat too, right? Like, it's not like the Evan Mobley, I'm going to catch your shot attempt and we're going the other way. So, that's not a bad point. Like, he is, he's a game changer for them, right? Like, I think there were questions about, there only being one ball and all that kind of stuff when they first added him, but it just so clearly adds a different dynamic. Like, there's so few players that have that combination of rim protection, outside shooting, like that size, right? Like, you don't usually get rim protection, size, shooting, and the ability to be thrown 40 feet by someone much smaller than you. Like, it's such a rare combo here.
He was, I don't know, man. If I'm the official, I'm giving him the flop call just for the hands behind his head, laying on the floor, taunting Strus. Very frustrating. But even, by the way,
that was 5 times less contact than the Şengün on Jared Allen play.
I know. Not a productive road for us to go down. But I will say this, despite the fact we're sitting here talking about the X's and O's problem with Porzingis, going back to my question about, was this just a bad offensive game? They lost Porzingis' minutes tonight. He was -2. So it's like, there is a degree to which, if your bench plays better and you don't let Al Horford absolutely cook you for 13 and 10, and you don't give 3 offensive boards to Peyton Pritchard, the Celtics bench, Hauser +18, Horford +19, Kornet +10, and Pritchard +19. It's like, that's just the game. That's the game right there. Whereas you look at the Cavs, Niang's -13, LeVert's -23, Jerome's -11. And I don't want to be
like, those numbers speak for themselves.
Yeah, I don't want to be reductive, but like, there is, as much as I'm concerned about the Porzingis stuff, especially for Evan, who clearly is having a hard time attacking in the dunker spot with him down there, and they're having a hard time with their internal passing with all that length. Like, they've outscored the Celtics with him on the floor the last 2 games. So clearly that's not the killer app, but it doesn't help.
No. And, those, as I said, those stats speak for themselves. That's valuable information to have. It makes me happy that I have a tool like Zoom AI Companion taking notes, Carter, because only you can do your best work. Zoom AI Companion can help you do the rest, like automatically taking notes, answering meeting questions, and helping you respond to your coworker. Available at no additional cost with eligible paid plans. Work happy with Zoom AI Companion. It's so funny going up and down the lineups, because I'm looking at the lineup data from this game, and almost every single lineup we had that played at least 4 minutes was a positive. Like, the starting 5 outscored Boston by 6. They had a +19 net rating, even though, the offense wasn't good and they missed their shot.
Net. I gotta say, that first 6 minutes of the game where there were like 10 total points scored, I was in basketball heaven. Those 2 teams were guarding like crazy.
Honestly, it made me feel good. I was like, okay, we're getting a full intensity game from Boston here. Like, we've seen the Mullally gag, but they are absolutely coming out and giving their best punch. Like, every single lineup pretty much has a positive, like, plus minus, not even talking net rating. Like, they outscored Boston. And then there's just the one. and it's funny because watching it live, I felt like,
what was the one?
Well, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
Like, watching it live, I felt like the minutes where Merrill and Niang were sharing the court, we were just giving up too much defensively. Like it was just a little too easy for Boston to pick their spots. I think that's when we didn't go to a lot of zone, but I think that's when we went to a few zone possessions as well. Then I look at the lineup data, and we actually won those minutes. We won the Maryland Niang minutes by 7. What went wrong was 5 minutes where we had Ty Jerome, Donovan Mitchell, Karis LeVert, George Niang, and Mobley out there. We were outscored by 14 in those 5 minutes. And that was, that's the game right there. And I didn't think, that Jerome played particularly bad. I don't think it's anything, unique about that lineup. But I think it just goes to show, like, you give Boston, like, if you have a bad 5 minutes against Boston, that can put you in a hole that you just can't dig out of.
Yeah, I mean, and man, you're right. There's not much more to say than that. Like, that was the lineup that killed you. Karis just did not have it going. Just one of those games where, even his 3 assists, he had 2 turnovers. So it's like even the playmaking wasn't really working for him. And who knows if that wrist is all the way right. Definitely wasn't leaving his hand with a ton of arc.
Yeah,
and he wasn't snapping that thing.
He was passing up shots against Dallas too. Like it was noticeable for me, and it's very rare that I'm noticing negative things in a 43-point win. But yeah, he's very clearly working his way back, and it's the tough thing because when you play a team like Boston, there's just, as I said, there's so little margin for error, man. And one thing I want to highlight though is we haven't talked about Darius yet in this game, and I thought to start the game, I liked his assertiveness. I thought he was creating a lot of those open shots that we ended up missing. It's probably a high potential assist game for him. But I noticed after he got hit in the face by Tatum, he was very, very, he was irate. And I do not blame him for that. But I was taking note because it made me think back to the first game in Boston where, the bad shooting, the missed shots, just everything spiraled and he never really got back on track. After he got hit in the face, he was demonstrative. His next 2 floaters hit the back iron, which usually he's either money on them or it's hitting the front rim and rolling in. So for him to, be fired up and throwing it over the rim, I thought was noteworthy. And I was like, all right, let's see if he's able to settle himself down a little bit here. Can he bounce back? Because that was one of our main takeaways from that loss in Boston was, Darius had a bad start and he wasn't able to kind of turn it into at least an okay game. And not to say that there weren't mistakes. The lazy, entry pass in the third quarter drove me nuts, where Drew Holiday kind of read it and picked it off. You have to be sharper. You have to be more crisp than that. But, ultimately ending with 25 points on 20 shots, I felt like he did a good job of kind of rallying himself, and it was an improvement from what we saw in that game in Boston.
Yeah, I thought Darius played a fine game. I think the 3 assists to 3 turnovers isn't really reflective of the playmaking. I felt like he got into space really, really well. And a few of those runs that got them back into the game, he was kind of the lead orchestrator for. I think the percentages as a scorer, I think, got redeemed by the 7 points when they were trying to claw their way back. By the way, what constitutes a flagrant review on a 3-point foul? I couldn't tell you for the life of me because
stunned that wasn't even reviewed.
I mean, it's fine.
They review everything.
Yeah, I don't want to freak out because I didn't think they deserved to win. Anyway, I didn't think they played their best game, and I'm not here begging.
Yeah.
I'm not here begging for flagrants so they can win games that they didn't play well. But with that said, I was purely at an academic level. He took a jumper, Peyton Pritchard closed out to the point where Darius, without jumping forward, landed on his foot.
Yeah, I
thought that's what the rule was for.
You want to know my annoyance at that point? Because I agree with you. At that point, I'm like, you know what? We didn't play well enough to win. We're not going to win this one. It's fine. This is all kind of academic. I was annoyed because I was like, God, this review is going to take forever. They're going to look at this for another 10 minutes. I'm going to lose even more sleep tonight. I was already pre-annoyed at that. And then when it wasn't even reviewed for a flagrant, I was baffled by that.
Yeah, I just don't know what the rules are. And there was also while I'm wearing my police cap, there was that one Porzingis dunk where he hung on the rim for like 6 seconds. I was just like, because like I remember that Matherin call, the game he got tossed. I'm like, he barely pulled himself up, and he got a tech. So I don't know. Maybe it was just a chill crew tonight.
That sounds like some Officer Rodriguez.
Well, I don't care. I don't actually like the hanging on the rim calls, but I was like, I just didn't understand. I was like, is that gonna happen? All right.
I would say that in kind of these marquee games and these matchups,
I'm fine with no call. I just was surprised by
you just seem a little testy about it, but
well, now I have to defend my honor a little bit. But the flagrant on Darius, or the lack thereof, I was certainly surprised by. So whatever, it is what it is. They just did. I just didn't think they played well tonight. And sometimes it's as simple as that. I do think we should give a little credit to Sam, who I thought competed pretty well. That's another player for whom I would say not his matchup. Like, Boston's big, they are athletic, they're strong, they're switchy enough to mess up, Sam's thing, the thing that Sam does best. And I thought there were a lot of points in this game that he kept them close.
Yeah, he gave them good minutes, and it was understandable that Kenny stuck with him and played him as much as he did. One, we're just trying to get anything going from three. Not that he had a great shooting game, but it makes sense. You're not hitting shots, put your shooter in. That's exactly when you would expect that to be the case. I thought Ty kind of struggled a little bit with the point of attack defense. I probably would have liked to see him just a little bit more, and maybe go 3 guards even, just because you are down so many bodies of, all right, as we said before, maybe Max plays some 4 there, and you go with Ty just to get Darius and Donnie some off-ball looks. But I thought Sam, gave them good minutes. I was really hoping that game against the Mavericks was the start of him kind of rediscovering his jumper.
12 of 18 for his last 2 games from 3.
his last 10
one of those games carrying a little extra water for us.
Yeah. They're going to be eating off of that for a little while. But I thought he gave them decent minutes. But I think, again, this is one of those spots where you do miss Okoro. You do miss Wade. It would be nice to have those guys. I thought
because it just gives you the option to play Sam or Max at the 4,
No, what the most annoying part of it is, too, is I feel like we haven't got to learn about what the rotation would be against Boston. Because all 3 of these matchups, like, we've been missing small forwards. Like, how much would we play someone like Sam or Yank if we have options available? How does Okoro play? When does Okoro get used? How does he get used? Do we go to other options? Like, I feel like we just kind of have lost the opportunity to kind of learn about that with this matchup, which is annoying. But at least we do play Boston again at the end of the month. So I hope that the team is healthy at that point and we can get some actionable data there. But I do feel like, there is enough that we've already learned from these games. Like, I feel like we've had enough to win each of these games, including the one in Boston, missing every wing. I think there is kind of some self-scouting that guys like even Darius and Evan can do in this matchup of, this is where I'm forcing things a little bit. I can't force it at the rim against Porzingis in this way. I need to adjust my approach because, to your point, like, I think Darius did a great job getting where he wanted to on the court. Like, I thought he navigated the defense of Drew Holiday and Derek White incredibly well and was able to move freely. It's just they're going to rush your decision making. So you have to learn to anticipate what they're going to do, and you have to have an understanding of what you can and can't do based on the personnel they have on the court.
Yeah.
And I think that self-scouting is really important.
Yeah, to your point, Just Good Games in the live YouTube chat just said, seems to take us a half to adjust to Boston's speed every time we play them.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to that. I think there is always this like learning curve where they kind of like, oh, that's how we have to play.
Yeah, and I think this is late enough in the podcast that I don't feel guilty bringing this up, but I that's one of my things I always worry about when you play a team that is just absolutely like disassembled, where it's all backups and you win by 43. Like your last 48 minutes of playing basketball were very unserious,
Yeah.
and you're turning around and going straight to Boston. That is less than fun. But I think that's a really astute point. I think that there is absolutely something to that. And, obviously you hope that if these teams see each other in the Western Conference Finals, that wouldn't be the case. Maybe you feel that in game one and then you settle into the series. But it's they're a really damn good team, man. They won the championship for a reason.
Absolutely, brother. We're getting near the 40-minute mark of the podcast, and I think we've hit this game at a bunch of angles. And the trade deadline is coming up on Thursday. It's a big one. But
I actually don't want to pivot to there just yet.
Yeah. Well, okay, that's fine.
Okay.
We can finish the game, but I want to get some takes off.
Okay. I do think we need to give some credit to Jared, because Jared was out there.
Great point.
17 points, 18 rebounds. The first half was interesting because neither team could secure defensive rebounds. Like I saw frustration about the Cavs giving up second chance opportunities, but Boston had 13 offensive rebounds. The Cavs had 11. For the game, it was 15 to 14. We actually had more second chance points than them, 16 to 13 second chance points. We even had more points off of turnovers, even though we had more turnovers. I thought Jared did a really, really good job when we credit what Boston's able to do with their interior defense with Porzingis and Horford and the size they were throwing out there, Cornette, making sure that they always had two bigs out there. I thought Jared, being as physical as he was, the way that he battled, the way he fought for offensive rebounds, deserved a big shout out. I thought outside of Donovan, he was probably the best member of the core four.
Here's another thing he did. He finished as explosively as he needed to. And by that I mean, I think against a lot of teams, you can go up, you can use your touch, you can or you can, really gather yourself and try to yam.
Mm-hmm.
Against the Celtics, sometimes you just got to get it up there quick. And I thought Jarrett did a really good job of that on some of his dump offs where, against other teams, maybe you jump up and really try to dunk it. But, he would just kind of, as soon as he got the ball up to rim level, he just kind of flick the wrist and just get it and just lay it up quickly and decisively. All the stuff Evan didn't do tonight, frankly.
It's, that's the beautiful thing about this team construct. Like, I think that there's stuff that Evan can learn from Jared. I think obviously Darius has done a lot of learning off of Donovan. I think, Darius and Donovan are probably going to have a conversation about that end of game possession where Donnie threw it to Max instead of Darius wide open in the corner. But, I think it's one of those things where I feel better about our ability to respond to situations like this in tough games because they had the support of one another. And, it's been an environment where they've had those kind of dialogue.
Brandon Efa in the chat also noted that Jared also was using the basket as a shield really well. Flip, pivoting into reverses where, getting the Boston big on the other side of the hoop. Just a really nice game for Jared and a tough game for Jared.
It didn't feel right to pivot without giving him credit.
No, you're 100% right. And in a game where Boston made the Cavs feel sped up, short of like a couple floaters from Jarrett that I felt like were coming out a little fast and a little flat. I felt like for the most part he just got in the mud and fought. And I really appreciated that. So very good call from you to pull me back. Before we talk about any trade deadline stuff, I wasn't here when Luka got traded. Can I sneak a couple takes in? Under the buzzer? Because I've just been thinking about this all week. And have had no outlet to talk about it. So I have two takes on why I think this trade was a really bad idea for Dallas that I think are somewhat that are somewhat under discussed. Okay. So take one. I think to some extent it can be easy as a front office to forget what the largest mission of the team is. So in a lot of ways, Like, if you were to ask a GM what his job is, the job is to build a team good enough to win a championship, right? But what is the org's goal? The org's goal is to build to forge a connection with a fan base that ultimately makes you money, sells you tickets, creates that kind of connection with a community that otherwise wouldn't be there. That's an org's ultimate goal. The Lakers are not the most popular franchise for the last 20 years because of all the winning they've done. They certainly have done some winning, but even when they stink, they're still the most popular franchise because they have done such a good job of building that kind of connection, among other things, of course. But I feel like when you make a trade like this, because of, because of what you're seeing in the locker room, you're kind of forgetting what your team's ultimate mission is, which is to connect to the fan base and the community. And like, you can't ignore that. And I feel like they kind of forgot that. And I don't think they were considering that much when they were making the trade.
It was such a dynasty football trade. Like,
yes.
That's the type of stuff that I do, where I just get too cute and I trade Josh Allen because I'm like, he's getting a little old. He's a little banged up. I can get Justin Herbert and Hawkinson. This is going to work out for me. I'm a 5D chess here.
Yeah. So I think that's thing one. I don't think they all the way understood how connected their fan base was to Luka, and how even if things played out the way that maybe they feared, that the juice is not always worth the squeeze, because once you hit once you hit a certain level of equity with a fan base as a player, like, winning stops being the most important thing. Look at
look how invested Philly fans are with Embiid, because they bought into the process. Like, no matter how many games he misses, and there's a lot of frustration there, but like, there's still like a deep connection there.
I think about late career Kobe, who was actively not crazy helpful. He had this huge contract that was weighing the team down, and all us smarmy Twitter jerks were like, "Oh, what a mistake." Lakers fans were by and large fine with it because they freaking loved that guy, and
they got that last game.
Yeah, and their experience with Kobe as fans at a certain point trumped championship. Yeah. So I think that's my take one, and then take two is, I feel like to some extent you have to take Nico Harrison and the Mavs front office at their word on the reasons they did this deal. And one of the things that has become abundantly clear to me in the reporting coming out of this is that they felt like Anthony Davis was much better than the consensus. Like, it's clear to me they think he's about as helpful as Luka now.
They think they're both top 8 players.
Yeah. And
which I would agree with, to be fair.
Yeah, and that maybe they felt that Luka, his value wasn't as high as consensus. And here's the thing: I'm fine with bucking conventional trends in how you're evaluating things. I think if you're going to be a great executive, sometimes you're going to have to do that, because if you're just swimming the same direction as everyone else, it's hard to find an advantage.
Case in point, these Cavs.
Yeah, with that, yeah, exactly. So if you're a fan of this Cavs team, you know that to be true. However, what's important when you're going to do that is when you go into a negotiation, you have to assign the public value to these assets, not your value. So like, if you are going into this trade feeling like AD and Luka are pretty much on the same level, and you're negotiating in a vacuum, you're like, hey, I got an equivalent player back and a first round pick. Yeehaw, I did it. But the reality is that's not
Max Christie slander.
Yeah, that's not their public perception. That's not what the wider public feels about them. So you should be working to recoup the value of what the public perception is, so you're gaining an advantage by valuing AD as much as Luka.
Your own trade chart is telling you that you're winning by even more in your own head.
Yeah,
right?
so you should be, if you think you've got an even trade on your trade chart that says that they're even value, then you need to, like, if you feel like you're winning a little, you're making the bold move. So you should be winning by a lot.
Yep.
So those are the two things that I feel are under discussed with the Luka trade. Your thoughts?
I think you are completely on the money. I think, the connection to the city and fan base is the most important thing, right? Like, I think at its heart, that's what we try to focus on with this podcast, because that is what really matters to us. Like, fandom it's the dumbest thing we do, but it's sacred to some extent, right? Like, man, like, this is what it's all about, like finding ways to really be invested. When the team sucked, we weren't sitting here pretending that they were going to make the playoffs every single year. We're like, yeah, it's probably going to be a 21-win team, but here's why we care. Like, this is what we're invested in. These are things to keep an eye on. And like, going through that process, it was less of a build because Luka was so great from the start, but riding that out and then just having it end abruptly would be really difficult. The only thing that, you covered so many bases there. You cooked. I'm not going to push back or add a whole lot. I just want to add how funny it is that they added a second-round pick to Luka. That's it.
Ay.
It's the Lakers going to say no if that wasn't in there.
There's a lot of that, It's just a crazy deal, and I feel for Anthony Davis, who is a great player.
Dude,
and
he's getting way too much slander. He's
sure,
way too good. Yeah.
Sure. And I do think, there are worlds in which the Mavericks win this trade. Because I thought
this season, especially, there's a chance they're better this year. Yep.
Yeah, I thought Tim Bontemps wrote a great article and a great framing, kind of wrapping this around the Big Short. This is them shorting Luka Doncic stock to some extent, and so you win the trade by either being better than you were before, and maybe going and making another finals run, winning a title or something like that, or you win it by the Luka experiment failing. All the stuff that you've been leaking over the last couple days coming to fruition. Luka's not healthy. He's not taking care of himself, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the problem is you don't just win the trades on the court, and that takes me back to that point one, which is, even if you win the trade, I don't know if the fans are going to love you anymore for it, because you traded away the guy they love. Like, they almost would. Sometimes, as I mentioned with the late career Kobe comparison, sometimes fans would rather go down with their guy, even if it doesn't play out right.
Feel the same, right? Like, not all feel the same. I think that is evident anytime you talk to a Warriors fan. Like, they would trade pretty much all of them for 2016. Like, they know that 2017 and 2018 weren't as fun because Kevin Durant was there. You're totally right. I was expecting Cavs take for trade deadline, because I gave a few of those in the last couple podcasts. Where are you at there?
Yeah, I think where I'm at is I would like to see. I think I'm at the point now, after having put some thought into it, where I'm kind of torn. Because on one hand, I'm really, really fond of this team and all of their players. I think everyone on this roster, and maybe there's just a certain closeness to it that I feel right now, but everyone on this roster is providing some kind of value, either to the now on the court, the now off the court, or to the future. And it's really, really hard to talk about moving any of them. So that's one half of my brain. The other half of my brain is just kind of like, I think I'm settled at, I'd be disappointed if no moves were made, just because sitting right above that luxury tax line just feels like the worst thing to do. Like, you either get closer, you go upgrade, you go add talent, whether it's by trade, using the mid-level exception in a trade, even just absorbing some salary, or taking on, or making a 2-for-1 or something like that, or just upgrading at a position of need. We've talked a lot about how their backup big situation can get dire real fast.
Yeah.
Or you get under the tax. You figure out a way to get creative to
Which to, we've talked about how difficult that would be. I've saw some numbers and some cap people being smart saying that, there are some end of bench guys that if you move off of and then you get creative.
you do the 10-day dance and then
you do the 10-day dance for a little bit, you can actually get under. Once I was like made aware that that's a possibility, I'm with you. Like, one direction or the other.
But there is a third direction. Sorry. So direction one is get a little better, add some marginal talent. But don't go crazy. Just get a little, just add to what you have, so you're not just sitting right over the threshold. Then there's maybe get a little worse, aka duck the tax. Find a way to, maybe give up a little bit in terms of the on-court product, in terms of the chemistry, etc., and duck the tax and avoid being on the clock. The third one is make a big splash. Add $8-10 million worth of salary in a big trade for a big upgrade if it's available. And really,
I just don't even think that's possible. But who knows?
Well, maybe not add 8 to 10, but like 8 to 10 into next year. Like you get you really make you make a splash for a player who makes $15 to $25 million somewhere in there. And like, I gotta say, where I'm at is I think I would prefer all three of those routes before I would prefer standing pat. That doesn't mean standing pat is a bad choice, but if you just were to say gun to your head, Carter, make a call, I would pick one of those three first.
Yeah, and thinking back to even 2 deadlines ago, like, we are such prisoners of the moment, and we think we have our finger on the pulse of what the right decision would be and what's not. Like, I remember we were very into the idea of moving, Karras for Tim Hardaway Jr. Even like, theoretically as a movement shooter, expiring contract when we were in this spot before. That would have been a big mistake. Tim Hardaway Jr. has not been good since that point. I don't think that would have changed the outcome against the Knicks. I know that wouldn't change the outcome against the Knicks. Like, so I don't want to sit here and act like I have the answers, but I'm with you. I'd like to see, at least a minor move. Like, I'm actually okay with staying just over the tax if there's like a minor little move to get a little better. Like, let's say, we add a big that we feel good about, that we have some depth there. You're still below the first apron. You started the repeater tax, but we found a way to get a little bit better. I'm also okay with, finding a way to duck under because there isn't an upgrade available. And of course, like, I'd be very excited about a real upgrade or the potential of an upgrade. Because I do think anytime you talk about matching salaries with some of the names out there, like when you look at a Cam Johnson, when you look at a DeAndre Hunter, you're moving out multiple pieces. And there's a chance that, it's a lateral move. There's a chance from a fit perspective or that the health isn't there or whatever the case may be. It's not a guaranteed upgrade. But I'd be really excited about that. Like, DeAndre Hunter, as an example, is someone that I've wanted for years. Like, I think that was even one of our off-season guys that we kind of targeted of, well, if the Hawks are looking to move some salary, maybe that's a guy that would get you excited. Like, would get me really excited. But I also understand that we are working with limited assets, and, you have to be really selective of when you pull the trigger, when you're using that powder, because your options are limited and you're dealing with a very good status quo in the meantime as well that you don't want to disturb.
Yeah, this is where the connection between Kenny and Kobe, I think, and Mike Yancey is really important.
Great point.
Because if you're evaluating something when a team is not anchored by a singular force like LeBron, who is kind of your inherent culture, I think things get a little more fragile when you're based on the collective. You don't have the stability necessarily. So like, I do think you want to check, you want to do the read, like, hey, Kenny, like, if we make this move for this kind of guy, is this, how are people going to react? Are we going to be able to bounce back? Are they going to be excited? Are they going to be hurt?
Honestly, you probably even solicit maybe some thoughts from, the guys in the locker room. Like, you asked on them, and you asked
certainly your top guys.
Yeah, like you Yeah, not players that you're considering shopping.
But yeah, just hand a questionnaire out in the locker room. Who would you be cool with losing? Who would you not be?
Yeah, and I share your feelings of like I feel really really connected to this group, like top to bottom. It would really hurt, to see anyone move, but this is the toughest part of team building. So I'm excited to see how this all kind of plays out.
Yeah, man, it's going to be an interesting deadline. I think obviously the biggest powder has already been fired in the Luka deal, which no one even knew was coming, and then the De'Aaron Fox trade to San Antonio, which I'm really excited to see.
I am too. Yeah,
how that works in San Antonio, and see if that makes them like a no doubter playoff team, or if it's more of a small move. But by the way, how about all the whining about how impossible it is to do deals in the new CBA, and then we have to do like the biggest surprise trade in the history of the sport, and then another absolute blockbuster in Sacramento with a bunch of big salaries moving around. And it's like, okay, I think you can.
The new CBA has killed movement until it is so punitive that it makes the Dallas Mavericks consider whether or not they want to pay Luka.
Well, again, I think that's a singularity to some extent, but
yes, I agree with that.
But it's just funny to me. Like, do you really think that because it's harder for you to fire up the trade machine, that NBA GMs and front offices and cap experts whose whole job it is to make trades workable will just be like, well, it's hard now, so
honestly, thinking about it, people being less able to use the trade machine is probably a good for the human race.
Yeah, heaven forbid. Brandon in the chat just asked if we have any Butler thoughts. Any ideas on where we think he'll stay put, or we think he'll find a way out of there?
There, I was very worried that he had been moved or whatever. Not really. Like obviously no interest from a Cavs standpoint. But too hard to match the money, doesn't shoot, personality, all those factors. I guess it's Phoenix or bust. Like that seems to be what it is. Like when you get reporting that he's not interested in Golden State, not interested in Memphis, not like you're not interested in.
I was disappointed he wasn't interested in Memphis. I think that would be a fun place for him to go.
Yeah,
and they're good. They have a +8 point differential, dude. They're very good.
Plus, he likes country. Like, you would
very
think
weird.
It would work.
I don't know. Very weird. I got to say, when I'm looking at Jimmy and I'm looking at Brandon Ingram, I know I'm like the one person in the world that's defending like all these restrictions. I think a lot of people don't like them. But to me, I think something that's been just a functional truth as long as I've been a diehard NBA fan is that if you're even halfway decent, you'll get the max because your team doesn't want to lose you. And I think what we're seeing right now, you look at the Brandon Ingram situation, you look at the Jimmy Butler situation, is we're seeing maybe not first-tier superstars, maybe not second-tier superstars, but like guys in that third and fourth tier, like, or for reasons of age or, just straight up talent level or whatever it may be, we're starting to see more teams play chicken with this because there's like, we can't afford to do this. Like, it will limit our flexibility in a way that makes this, the math not good enough for us. It was already sketchy in the old era to be paying, a guy like, Ingram as much as LeBron. But like now it's too limiting and the juice is not worth the squeeze. And to some extent, Justin, I'm just like, wasn't this what we all were asking for these guys to have to play a little chicken? Because let's say no one trades for Brandon Ingram. His options are going to be make what the market says he should make or be out of the league. And like, I thought that's what we were hoping for, is to have a more variable payment structure where you don't just have the top 40 guys all making the max and everyone else making the minimum, but instead guys who are tier 2 superstars being paid in the tier 2 superstar tier. Guys who are tier 3 superstars being paid in a tier 3 superstar tier. Like, I know it's more unpleasant because we see more negotiations happening now, but I just can't help but wonder if some of this is sea change stuff. Being the first over the wall, where it feels really rough.
It's establishing norms.
Yeah, like, so I don't know, man.
And precedent. Yeah,
I know. I know not a lot of people love the restrictions of this CBA for whatever reasons, but I do think it's interesting, and I think it's been under-discussed.
Yeah, and you know, my favorite aspect is I do think because it makes it harder to make moves and whatnot, we actually see teams kind of stick it out a little bit more.
Yeah.
And you get to see,
Heaven forbid teams have to be thoughtful.
Let's do some problem solving here. Let's try to improve internally. And I said on the last podcast with S, but I love the fact that when you look at the top teams in both conferences, for the most part, like, that's what it is. It's teams that have had some time together, young teams that have stuck it out, that haven't tried to take major shortcuts and whatnot.
If the Cavs aren't freaked out about the second apron, do they do a straight up run it back this year? Maybe not. If they're not a team that's really trying, and Kobe spent a lot of time talking about it in his preseason availability, that, hey, we are interested in avoiding the second apron and maintaining our flexibility. Part of that, and I think he even said it, forgive me if I'm misquoting or...
you're saying like from a supplementing, like adding additional pieces standpoint?
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, they felt like it was important just to lock their guys in and know what they had in their pocket, so they didn't have to work. They didn't have to. They kind of could project out a little bit. I don't know. Yeah, like maybe I'm interpreting too much or intuiting too much, but
at the very least, it's food for thought. I wasn't expecting that. I was not expecting that this late in the podcast. I was not expecting myself to be intrigued. I am tired as hell. You are tired as hell. But you cook, man. It's been good to have you back. Any other closing thoughts before I wrap this thing up?
Well, I think we wrap it with Joe Gilbert's question in the chat, who just simply asked for a yay or nay. Do the Cavs make a trade by Thursday? So, yeah. I'm going the other way. I don't think they're going to. I think we see
a transaction.
I think I want it, but I sometimes you just have a gut feeling, and in this one, I just have a feeling that they are going to say, we don't want to mess with what we got. We've got enough. We trust our team. We trust our guys, and we're going to go a third straight deadline without a trade.
I think we're going to see a transaction, and if you look at the history of this podcast, usually it's me being right. So we'll see how that plays out. Carter, so good to have you back. Big thanks to our listeners. Thanks for tuning in on YouTube. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Click that notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of that review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.